Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Public Services Scrutiny Committee on today, the 1st of March. And with apologies for my poor Welsh accent, I'd just like to say Dies Goel Dewi Hapus, which I think means Happy St David's Day. But anyway, apologies, as I said. I am obviously not the chairman, Councillor Armand Watts, who he has had problems with his voice and laryngitis, so I am taking over today.
It was covered.
Right, okay, brilliant, thank you, Randy. There's a couple of things I'm dealing with for...
Apologies for that. That was an interruption from elsewhere, so I think it's gone to you. Right. Yes, we are live. Yeah. So apologies again. Anyway, we'll carry on. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence, and we have two apologies from Councillor Malcolm Lane and Councillor Jan Butler. Has anybody else got any other apologies? No? Second item is declarations of interest. Anybody got declarations of interest? Nope. And public open forum, there's no one here. So we'll get on with the main report. Coming back myself. Right, today we're going to look at the draft Gwent Wellbeing Plan, which was a plan that came to the last select committee that we had here, and we asked for it to come back because we felt that it lacked depth. I will hand over now to Sharon Lloyd and Richard Jones to perhaps discuss where they think it's been improved and any other comments that they have to make about it before we come back and with questions and comments. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that, Chair. Pleased to bring back before you today a draft of the Gwent Public Service Board's Wellbeing Plan 2023 to 2028. As the Chair's rightly said, it was a plan we brought before you in November. At that point, it was part of a statutory consultation phase to inform the further development of the wellbeing plan. As has been described, your comments were fed back as part of that consultation, along with a range of other comments that were received through a variety of ways. The wellbeing plan was subject to a public consultation event, as well as looking at targeted consultation with specific groups, as well as a range of workshops and different events with specific stakeholders and partners as well to inform its development. So all that evidence that was gathered has subsequently been used to inform the further development of the plan before you today, and this is your opportunity as a committee to provide any further comment ahead of its consideration by the Gwent Public Service Board at its next meeting in March, and also then its subsequent endorsement by Council, which is a requirement under the Future Generations Act, and also then approval subsequently by the Gwent Public Service Board itself. As a quick reminder about the background, and then just go into some of the changes that have been made to the wellbeing plan. The requirement to produce a plan is set under the Future Generations Act legislation, and the PSB needs to set a plan that sets out its objectives and steps it wishes to take to improve wellbeing in the area. This plan has been informed by the completion of a wellbeing assessment, which looked at assessing the social, economic, environmental and cultural wellbeing of Gwent as a whole, and also local areas that make up Gwent. So for Monmouthshire, that included the county of Monmouthshire and 5 local areas within it. And this wellbeing plan is the Public Service Board's first as a whole Gwent Public Service Board, and it needs to be approved under the legislation within 12 months of the last local council election, so by the 5th of May 2023 this year. So, as I mentioned, there is a statutory consultation period, which is on the evidence and formal development of the plan. The plan before you now sets out 2 key objectives for the region of Gwent for the Public Service Board. They are: we want to create a fairer, more equitable and inclusive Gwent for all, and we want to create a more climate-aware Gwent where our environment is valued and protected, ensuring our well-being now and for future generations. And to support the delivery of these 2 objectives, there are 5 steps identified in the plan, and these steps set out in a bit more detail the areas of focus for the Public Service Board to deliver those 2 objectives. And as you can see in the plan, there's quite a bit of integration between those steps and the objectives, recognising the various roles these issues play in improving well-being. I think it's probably important to stress as well, in addition to the objectives and steps, that these set the high-level ambition for the Public Service Board, and that these will need to be supported by more detailed delivery plans to set out more specifically what the Public Service Board and obviously all the partners that make up the Public Service Board will be undertaking to improve well-being in the area. And these will take the form of two main parts. First part will be looking at what actions the Public Service Board will look to undertake regionally, where there is benefit or alignment to these issues that cross-cut across Gwent and can be addressed most appropriately at that Gwent level, with all partners contributing as needed. And the second part then will be more local delivery plans, and those will be particularly set by local delivery groups, which are groups within each of the 5 areas within Gwent that support and align to deliver the Public Service Board's objectives. So those are particularly aligned to the steps and objectives in the plan, both in terms of what locally it can be done to address and contribute to the delivery of the objectives set by the PSB, but also where there may be more local differences in those where partnership activity is relevant to address them. There'll be more specific local activity within those as well, and particularly, for relevance for the Scrutiny Committee, the Public Service Board Scrutiny Committee will have a key role in particularly overseeing the regional Public Service Board's delivery plan, and they also have a role in local delivery plan, but equally this committee, I'm sure, will have an interest and a role then in the local delivery plans in Monmouthshire as well. So that will be key detail to follow, of which Scrutiny will be involved in. Also, just to add, there is still further developing evidence bases that will be taken into consideration. I think it's important to point out the work that's been undertaken in Gwent to become a marmot region, and that's, I know, set out within the report, and we're expecting shortly a report from the Institute of Health Equity around some of their key findings around how we can target or help to target reduce inequality and inequity within Gwent. And again, that will be key to embedding that through the delivery of the wellbeing plan, both in terms of the objectives and steps themselves, but particularly then into those delivery plans I've just mentioned. So that's hopefully gives you a background about how the plan has been developed since you last saw it, and also then what's next in terms of both the approval process and your opportunity obviously to feed into that in following today's feedback from today's session, but then also how the more detailed delivery will be undertaken in the coming weeks and months, and the role you as Scrutiny, either through representation on the regional Gwent Scrutiny that's been set up, or this committee will be involved in delivering some of the detail. So that's it, Chair. Obviously, you've got the recommendation there as well in terms of feedback to provide, so we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Richard. I'll just say a couple of words before I hand over, and it's just a couple of points. The first is that really it isn't really a plan, is it? It's more of a strategy, because it does lack detail. We hear your comments and the fact, and we acknowledge the fact that it has been there is more substance to it now, but it still could really belong to any scrutiny, any select committee. It could be. It's not specific to this. It's a group of objectives and the steps to achieve those objectives that can be found anywhere, really. It's almost like a bucket list, isn't it, of the perfect world? And my question is really, have there been, have things been adapted to take in the crisis, the energy crisis, the cost of living crisis that we're in at the moment? Because I'm sure these were written prior to the actual emergency, taking place as it is now, or the crisis as it is now. So how can we make it more realistic? Anyway, I'll just hand over to anybody who'd like to come in. Armand.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for stepping in for me today, right? That's very generous of you. With my croaky voice, I just got one or two questions here. So if you look at the 8 Marmot principles, they're worthy principles. I think everybody would be in agreement about that. Do the officers, and please forgive me if you think I'm driving this home to you, it's a broader issue. Do you think it really encompasses in the plan? Do you really think it embraces the spirit and ethos of those principles in that plan? What assistance does it give with us to actually enact on that plan, on those principles? In particular, say for example, tackling racism, discrimination, the outcomes. If you look, for example, at the glossy kind of rather, if I might say, generic, that graphic we've got here. I mean, it's painfully generic. It's kind of like something I've seen, albeit slightly more brighter, that I've seen in the last, 5-10 years that come from the authority. It feels to me it's just another process that we're all in that at the moment is going absolutely nowhere. And I think it's important to note as well the wider scrutiny of this. Well, I believe, if I'm right in saying this, that it's only us with our partners, it's only us and Newport that are actually properly scrutinising this. Can you explain to me why the other authorities are not scrutinising it? And do you think it's worth us contacting them and effectively appealing to them to effectively give it this kind of document closer examination? Because my view is at the moment it doesn't properly stand up. Thank you.
Would you like to come back in on that, Sharon or Richard?
Yeah, if I maybe start around the how we, I suppose, embed those Marmot principles within the plan. I don't know, Sharon, you want to pick up scrutiny then as well, which is the important point. So thanks for the feedback. The Marmot principles set out there. There's obviously wider work that has been ongoing alongside the wellbeing plan, working with the Institute of Health Inequity to develop and understand further the actions that the Public Service Board can take to improve well-being, reduce inequity within the region. The timing of that is they've been working side by side, but obviously it will be key now that the specific actions that recommendations that come forward from that report are then embedded within the plan to be taken forward by the Public Service Board. So I think with that evidence base to come from those experts in the field, the further delivery of the plan should take account of that and be more specific in terms of how those principles are actually then embedded in the plan. At the moment, the plan recognises lots of the issues. They recognise them, I think, as you rightly say, quite broadly, but that then allows the PSB then to particularly start to then focus down within those delivery plans that I mentioned, how it's going to specifically work as partners to tackle some of those issues more directly. And it probably links back to a point I think sort of made by Councillor Jones as well, about how the evidence base on which this plan has been developed. It has been formed from the wellbeing assessments that I mentioned, which was a wide exercise looking at social, economic, environmental, cultural wellbeing in Monmouthshire. And the PSB for its plan needs to then start focusing down on those specific issues. It needs to it needs to address. The wellbeing plan terminology is part of legislation, hence it's called a plan. But I accept the point that the objectives and steps then will need to be more specifically focused through those delivery plans, which is where it becomes more of a tangible plan. Also for you, Scrutiny, and obviously the public service communicate to residents primarily what it's looking to achieve. So. Just sort of hopefully covers sort of both questions, and certainly we welcomed working with the Institute around this, and particularly valuable insight they will bring that will subsequently inform the wellbeing plan.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank
you, Richard.
So I just have a supplementary. Yeah. I mean, I hear what you say. It all sounds quite generic, and I think that my job really is when I was chaired, obviously Penny is today, is to demystify some of the speak that goes on, especially for the new members. If we're going to have a robust kind of scrutiny committee, which I hope this would be, going forward, this is a huge piece of work, and I'm quite ambitious for this committee to really really get to the bottom of some of these issues, to explore this, investigate, and give it some proper public scrutiny, because that's what we're here to do. My only final question is where are the experts? You mentioned experts, and if they're not already there, where will they? When will we see the experts?
Yeah. Sorry, do you want to go? To that. So I think it's important that, as you rightly say, that the committee has that ability to drill down these into detail, both in terms of understanding the issues, what's been addressed, but also hold to account for delivery. In terms of the experts, I think particularly in terms of the work to address inequity, working with Professor Michael Marmot and his team there, bringing the wealth of expertise and knowledge they bring to this field. The Public Service Board has engaged with them and is working with them to look at building a fairer Gwent that's becoming part of Marmot region. That gives the Public Service Board some of those expertise and insight really to then build into its plan. As I say, the timing has been that's been working alongside each other, so that for the committee's point of view, you should see that then playing in the next few months in terms of the specific detail that the Public Service Board will address. And obviously, as partners, the partners themselves of the Public Service Board bring a range of different expertise from different fields, whether that be from the environment to health to policing and the networks they're involved in. So very much that partnership approach to the PSB enables it to bring together those range of different knowledge and expertise from across all partners to inform this. And particularly then again moving into the delivery, they will be key to then actually shaping those actions and then delivering them as well. And I'm sure that's something that will also feature as part of a future scrutiny work programme as well, about the various expertise and partner contribution to that as well. It wouldn't be for me to set that agenda today, but I'm sure that's something you pick up as well as part of your representation on the Gwent PSB scrutiny committee as well. Sharon, if you want.
Yeah, just to add to that, Chair, if I may, and to the question there from Councillor Watts. The Institute of Health Equity have also been engaging alongside this period of the plan development, so they themselves have actually been coming out and meeting with different populations in our community, meeting with different officers, meeting with some of our members to really get a feel for each of the 5 counties, so that when they're presenting their report to the PSB and the recommendations, they will absolutely be considered alongside the steps that have been put forward in this plan. So we're hoping that we will have the ability then to be able to bring these things together so we have a more cohesive approach to hearing that expertise come through in terms of the delivery, to enable us to ensure that the PSB is putting its energy, efforts and resources into the right areas going forward. But absolutely, that ongoing scrutiny in this space we feel is going to be crucial. And as for the other 3 authorities, the question you asked there, Councillor, I'm not entirely sure why the scrutiny committees have decided that they don't want to see the plan again. But for us, it's been incredibly beneficial that you're interested in this and are helping to shape this plan as it goes forward for Monmouthshire.
On that point, can I recommend that we appeal to their better nature? Could we write to them, or I'm asking you to ask me really, as chair, but would it be possible, Hazel, that we write to them and put a letter together requesting that they, I do apologise, properly scrutinise this document?
Yeah. I'm taking that on board. Okay. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair. Sharon, it was reassuring to hear that, in fact, it's essentially what you're saying is that one size is not going to fit all. It's going to be more individual than that, is it? Okay. Can anybody else would like to come in? Jill, do you want to come in? Yeah.
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you very much. Totally agree that, as has been explained, this is a strategy document and should be considered as such. I think on page 23 it says what will happen next and explains that it then disseminates down. So I totally agree with what's been said already. Thank you very much for all that. I just wonder if we already have done a look at the link between this and our corporate plan and made sure we're in line with this document, and see if there's any differences that we ought to be aware of, and making sure that we've thought about. So it's a good strategy document, but as everyone else has already said, there's no substance to it, as in how it applies in Monmouthshire. But that'll come, you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Good point. I did, in fact, think of the what do you call it? What were we talking about? The community. The corporate plan, that's right, the corporate plan, because it kind of reminded me of it in a way. It's so generic, you know, it's more Monmouthshire plan. Anyway, anybody else like to say anything? Councillor Garrett, Councillor?
Sorry, could they answer that then, please?
Oh, sorry, yes, sorry.
Could they answer if it's been looked at?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Would you like to come in, Richard?
Thank you. Yeah, and it's a good point that the Public Service Board Wellbeing Plan sets the vision for Gwent, and that needs to link and tie into the work we undertake as Monmouthshire County Council, and there is various overlaps there. You know, from practically the evidence base that underpin this in the wellbeing assessment has informed also the development of our community corporate plan. So looking at those issues of social, economic, environmental, and cultural wellbeing in Monmouthshire in particular that have come out from the Gwent wellbeing assessment were considered in our corporate plan, and there's lots of the overlap in the issues that have come out. Obviously, to deliver our consciences at a Public Service Board Scrutiny, Public Service Scrutiny Committee meeting, but in order for Monmouthshire to deliver its corporate plan, lots of those actions are look about how we work in partnership and how we work with partners with those on the Public Service Board for a range of issues. So, the objectives in here around creating more fair, equitable, inclusive Gwent for all, and then the focus around climate-ready Gwent. There's strong overlap there with the developing objectives within the council's community and corporate plan, and undoubtedly there'll be overlap there and alignment in delivery as well, particularly for those actions that will be undertaken in partnership. And also, just to add, as we talked about, the more local Monmouthshire delivery plan that will be developed by the Monmouthshire Local Delivery Group partnership underneath the Gwent Public Service Board, again, will include them as more specific actions relevant to Monmouthshire that will align to the corporate plan as well. So absolutely, the two have been developed so far and will continue to develop to align to each other.
All right, Councillor Bond. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Rook.
Thank you, Chair. I understand from the documents that we have that the draft has to be approved by the 5th of May. What is the time frame for us to look at our area plan? And how do we, as members of the Scrutiny Committee, be involved in the development of the local area plan? Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor, are you referring to the RPB's area plan, the Regional Partnership Board plan? I believe that plan also came through to scrutiny with yourselves around the same time as our wellbeing plan. I don't believe there is a process now for them to bring that back through scrutiny. It sits in a different part of the business to the PSB world, but we can certainly find out what the timescales are for that plan. But I would imagine the area plan is on a similar time frame to producing the wellbeing plan in terms of legislative requirements. But we can certainly ask that question for you of that regional team and bring that back to you.
Thank you, Sharon. Anybody want to say anything? No? Shall we sum up then?
Sorry, Chair. Sorry.
Yes. Oh, sorry. You want to? Yeah. I can't.
Just to, some of us are on town councillors as well, and I know that town councillors and community councillors will be interested in hearing more about this. Will there be any outreach work? Maybe attending some certain council meetings just to present this to them. A lot of councils meet hybridly these days, so it's possible to like Monmouth Town Council, you could attend that meeting online. So that would be something I'd be interested to know whether we could do that, so that we could engage community and town councillors as well. Thank you.
Good point. Sian, do you want to come back? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. The plan would have been sent out to all the local town and community councils through the consultation period to feed back on. So we hope you would have had that opportunity. Also, the clerks do meet on your behalf from the town councils and sit as a representative on the Monmouthshire Programme Board, which is the local delivery group of the Public Services Board. So the shaping, I think, of this plan and the delivery that sits below this plan going forward is where we would absolutely look for your involvement then in that process. So yes, we would absolutely come out to you once this plan is in a better format to discuss that with you.
Thank you. Well, to sum up, I think what we have to acknowledge is that it seems to be a lack of partnership at the moment within this framework. So to what extent, because the main question I think has to be asked is, to what extent has this document been written by the partnership of the 5 councils? Because at the moment we don't think it is. But also we are supposed to be a partnership, and yet there seems to be a lack of ownership. Shouldn't we all be having an equal say? And that includes the scrutiny, as we've already mentioned. So I think what has to be fed back, perhaps through letter or whatever, the chair, I'm sure, will do this, will write not only perhaps to the other local authorities, but certainly the feedback for this scrutiny will be that we feel that it's too one-sided or two-sided if there are 2 of us doing scrutiny, and there's not enough ownership and there's not enough depth. And the other thing is, I would like to know if there's any changes going to be made regarding the current crisis, energy crisis and cost of living crisis, and whether that will be taken into account. So, Councillor Watts, do you have anything else you'd like to say, to take forward?
No, I think you succinctly kind of summed it up, Chair. I mean, it's important that we try and, kind of get some response really from our partners. And I mean, if necessary, if they're not prepared to kind of scrutinise, and it does kind of call into question, I guess, really the legitimacy really of this document, doesn't it, really? And I think if we get to that stage, which I hope we won't, maybe it's appropriate that we take some advice from WLGA, or maybe the Minister himself or herself, really, to effectively take some further guidance on it, because it's pointless being involved in some kind of cooperation if people are simply not cooperating. Thank you, Chair.
All right, Hazel, are you okay with that? Okay. Right, we'll now go on to the, item 5 is the Stagecoach bus services, and it has to be said here that they were not prepared to attend a meeting. Perhaps I think one of the suggestions is that we write to them and ask why this is so, and to perhaps ask them to attend again. And Hazel would like to come.
Yes, Chair. They've asked us to outline our concerns in writing rather than attending a meeting. And I've had a brief discussion with Christian, who's here at the back of the chamber. And I think the officers would like to prepare a report for you, which would be quite helpful in sort of consolidating some of the concerns that you may then wish to reflect back to Stagecoach. So if you're agreeable to take a report from Christian and his colleagues, I think that would be very helpful to you in then drafting something for Stagecoach to respond to. It will give you a fuller picture of some of the transport issues throughout the county.
I'll refer to Councillor Watts now. Councillor Watts?
No. Thank you, Chair, and through you, Chair. I mean, it is kind of slightly disappointing that they don't want to attend. I mean, it's hardly, that some parliamentary subcommittee where you've got people's careers at stake and, where the questions are driven by ambition. The only ambition really that we've got as kind of provincial councillors is effectively to scrutinise, and ask some kind of questions. I wouldn't say we're, there can be some robust exchange, but we're not unfriendly. I can't imagine that if we invited them along, we wouldn't get a cup of tea and, maybe a cake or whatever they're doing at the back there. But, at the end of the day, it's kind of disappointing, really. And we should really be able to articulate that to them and express our disappointment, because at the end of the day, we're here to serve the community, and they're facilitating the service up to the community. Thank you, Chair.
Christian, would you like to add anything? Do you want to say anything? And perhaps could you identify yourself and your position first, please?
So, yes, I'm Christian Schmidt, Passionate Transport Planning and Projects Manager at MCC. Yes, I mean, there is obviously a bit of a wider issue with bus services at the moment, both a short-term issue in that the Welsh Government has provided extensive additional funding since COVID to keep the bus services running, and they are reducing it now and thinking about stopping that now, which may have substantial consequences for bus service, because basically there has been quite a bit of a cost increase since COVID, and also there's been an effective, no fares increases. So even running the pre-COVID network would cost more money, even if we get the same passengers, and we're still behind on passengers. So that's really the short-term issue. The long-term issue is that, even if you go back to the pre-COVID network, that the bus network in Monmouthshire probably wasn't that something which we were happy with. And Transport Wales has come to us and says, look, let's, yes, we've got a short-term issue here, but also let's look into the future about this. So these are really the two issues with the bus network going on at the moment. And we are talking Transport Wales, but it's early days yet on this type of thing. It's a bit fluent, I think, the situation like this, because we really don't quite know how much funding Welsh Government will make available for the next financial year, and when, and what the terms and conditions are going to be, and what consequences that has going to be for the bus services in the short term. While at the same time, members clearly have got questions, even saying, look, what improvements are going to be possible. So it's, my best guess is the Stagecoach also feels they would be put in a bit of a impossible situation, because they're going to ask questions which they feel they cannot answer, or where, let's put it like this, the answer they would give you next week might be different from this week, because this is a current situation which they're in. Particularly on this service, we appreciate the concerns. The Stagecoach services, the X3 and the 78, are so-called commercial services, so they're run by Stagecoach. They take the financial risk. They don't get any funding from Monmouthshire for these. And clearly, if they are getting the bus emergency funding from Welsh Government, and if that goes, there is a risk to the services, some of them which carry school children. So we are quite worried about this. We have started talking to them, and we have asked them to saying, look, let us know if there's anything is going to happen. They haven't come back to it, because my understanding is that they're still looking at what the options are. And as I said, what they think their options are is literally changing quite regularly. So that's I guess the situation where it is. And I'm quite happy to put this into a proper report to a future meeting, if that's what you wish.
Yeah, look, I think, if we're effectively, what Christian's doing is essentially second-guessing their answers, and what Christian said was quite reasonable. If it's a moving feast, really, and they don't want to those are all reasonable answers. And I think, what we would be looking to do is get effectively some honesty about that. here. To simply not turn up and say, we're not coming, we don't want to come because we're frightened that you're going to ask us some difficult questions. Well, you know, it's poor optics, and they should be reminded of that, really, Christian. So I know you get it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christian, for that. And we appreciate too that it's an incredibly difficult time for those businesses at the moment. You know, it's not easy. So yes, a report in the future would be most welcome. So thank you. Right, next item on the agenda is the hate crime in Monmouthshire. We were provided with some figures and some data yesterday, I think it was, wasn't it? And we have two officers, community safety coordinators, here today, John Cradden and Andy Mason, and you're most welcome, thank you. And I think you're going to, do you want to just talk it through, and then we'll ask questions later, all right? So I don't know who's going to go first. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Have we got the, Hazel, have we got the things on screen, or display them?
You could share them on your screen.
Okay. Okay. We've asked the police for some the hate crime data, and we've obtained the last 2 years. So when we see the column there, we will have the 2021-22. There were 132 hate crimes recorded in Monmouthshire. I'll break those down in a minute. Compared to this year, 22-23, which goes up until the date that we had the figures supplied, which is the 16th of February. So there's still 6 weeks to go to the end of the year, so it's not obviously a straight comparison. But there are some sort of indicators in that. So far this year, we have had 105. So that is indicating a slight decrease. As regards the characteristics of the hate crime, there's two that are showing decrease, which is disability and racial. So disability hate crime is showing 46 last year to 25 this year, and racial is 64 down to 46 so far. There are two that are indicating an increase, which is homophobic and transphobic. So last year for homophobic there were 17. That's so far this year is 27. So that's quite an increase. And the transphobic, very low numbers, but 3 last year to 5 so far this year. And religious hate crime has stayed the same, 2 last year, 2 so far this year. So that's sort of an indication of the, and if you compare our sort of figures with the other areas, we are the lowest across the board. So when we asked then about repeat victims, there's been 6 repeat victims. This is talking about this year's figures so far. 6 repeat victims, 5 female, 1 male. 1 repeat victim in disability in the age 25 years. Obviously, a lot of the personal stuff is redacted, but 2 repeat victims in homophobic, 1 age 66, 1 age 32, and 2 repeat victims in racial, age 12 and 14. Which is obviously quite significant, would indicate sort of a school possibly based. So when we look at the areas of where hate crime has been happening, it's quite an even spread really across the 4 areas of Monmouthshire. And there's one in Thornwell, for example, there were 7 recorded incidents, Green Lane 5, Priory 4, St Mary's 4, and 7, 3. The other areas are 2s and 1s, so I won't go through all of those, but there are some little, but again, you know, we might have in the Thornwell, we might have one of the repeat victims that is is, counting the numbers, adding to the numbers. So that's just a real sort of very broad overview. John's got a little bit, add in some more detail, if you like, in terms, yeah?
Chair, if it's okay, just to add some context, just having those figures just on their own, with the context and some of the background. For some other work I did last summer, it's probably worth having an idea of the populations, because just having a figure, it's not comparing apples with apples, as it were. So to go through the 5 local authorities, Monmouthshire, 93,000 people live in Monmouthshire. These are figures from the last census. In Torvine, 92,300. So there's very similar numbers. And obviously what you can see there is probably our hate crime figures are half Torvine's, and yet with a similar population. So just to give it some context. In Blaenau Gwent, again, the figures that Andrew just covered would indicate probably double the amount of hate crime incidents, and yet their population is 66,900. So again, that's indicating our figures are less. Of course, Newport is 159,600, and Caerphilly is 175,900, just to give that context. So I think the context, what that suggests to us is that our numbers of hate crime in Monmouthshire are relatively low. It's probably worth mentioning as well, in the work that Andrew and myself do, we have regular contact with the police. We have a monthly crime and antisocial behaviour meeting, and in that monthly meeting sits around the table partners from a wide variety of areas: trading standards, environmental health, our registered social landlords, education, safeguarding, community cohesion, of course the police, probation, South Wales Fire and Rescue Service and South Wales Ambulance Trust. And in that meeting, one of the areas we've introduced as a topic for discussion that the police raise is hate crime. And certainly since I've been working for Monmouthshire, there's never been any particular issues that have been brought to the table by the police to say we may have an emerging issue or problem here. So that, again, to give you that additional context. The other thing I'd like to say is Andy and myself, on a weekly basis, have a face-to-face meeting with the crime and disorder reduction officers in the police, where what's happening in the last week, where are we going? And again, there are no issues around hate crime that are certainly being brought to the table that we're aware of. I'm just pausing there. Yeah.
No. Do you want to come in? Or shall we let you finish first?
Yeah, okay. The one thing that I was going to mention as well is, again, Andy used Thornwell, saying there were 7 incidents in Thornwell. It's probably worth mentioning there, in terms of ethical crime recording with the police, there could have been an incident, which could be one incident, where if, for instance, it was in a takeaway, and I'm using that as an example, and someone has racially abused 3 people in there, they would be 3 separate offences. So I think we do need to be careful in identifying hotspots to say, is this a problem? It may just be 1 or 2 isolated incidents, and it was just worth pointing out. Is it worth me actually talking over the definition of what a hate crime is? No? It's literally a couple of lines, okay? It's any criminal offence which is perceived by the victim or other person to be motivated by hostility or prejudice based on a person's disability or perceived disability, race or perceived race, religion or perceived religion, sexual orientation or perceived sexual orientation, or transgender ID or perceived transgender ID. So the 5 areas are race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, and transgender ID. And that's quite that is the definition from the Crown Prosecution Service that I'm aware of. So it's just one of the other things worth mentioning anecdotally is the figures alone will not give you the whole picture, and there are subtleties to this. And anecdotally, the example I would give, without going into detail, is this week I was made aware of an individual, a young person under the age of 18, who has made racial comments in one of the towns in Monmouthshire to a shopkeeper. The shopkeeper does not want to make a complaint, but this individual has been on the radar. This is the second time that they've made similar comments to that shopkeeper. But of course, the shopkeeper is running the business, doesn't want to alienate himself with the public, so there are those added complexities as well. It's probably also worth mentioning as well that one of our colleagues is planning, I think in April, to run an event around taxi drivers, because it's about perception, and without knowing what a hate crime is necessarily, it's been targeted at taxi drivers initially. Because I think there's a suggestion that they are predominantly black and minority ethnic groups involved with that, and what sort of comments and behaviours are being displayed towards those. And it's a case of educating them to understand what hate crime is, which may increase numbers. But when you think about that, the takeaways, nighttime economy, what comments are made when people are running businesses. So I suppose what I'm introducing there is, yes, we've got these figures. They don't seem to be high. There don't seem to be any particular themes or anything to be concerned with, albeit we want to get zeros. Of course, that would be what we would aspire to. How well reported is it, is my question that I would leave you with. And they are the subtleties and the complexities in areas like this that I suppose we are dealing with.
Thank you. Are you coming back, John? Sorry.
I was just going to come back with.
Andy, come in. Yes.
Yeah. Obviously, hate crime doesn't sit on its own. These are extenuating circumstances to any crime. So it could be a theft, an assault, a public order offence, any of those offences. But if there's a hate crime element to it, it will be recorded as a hate crime. So we haven't got all the individual, whether it was public order, assault, or because. But these are the ones that have that element of attached to them.
I know that Councillor Watson's coming.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I don't want to dominate this, but I guess it's about perception as well. So, and you touched on circumstance, really, and you also mentioned then schools and that potentially then that some of the crimes could have taken place at schools. What we haven't got in front of us is an objective overview of that would allow this committee, or indeed the general public, of understanding where these crimes actually take place. So, for example, when you look at the national picture, you look at the Home Office stats, they'll give you an indication of where, not always, but where those figures, where those incidents have taken place. It could be at school, as you've mentioned. It could be at the hospital. Now, this is an important point. A lot of our key workers are from different minority populations. That we haven't really established that. And what I'm concerned about then, on the backdrop of that, is that the figures are unusually low compared to, say, the other counties. What we do know in the back of the COVID is that the South Asian population have suffered incredible amount of discrimination on the, through COVID on the back of it. It's a national picture. That hasn't replicated here. So is it that we're more enlightened as a population, or is it that that effectively that crime isn't taking place? And that's what worries me, is that we seem to be disproportionately, considering then that we're on the border and we've got a new influx of population, and the population is slightly more transient, particularly in the south, I would say. I don't know, I'm probably going to get told off now by members from the north, that there is probably, and what we also know, sorry, I was going to mention this, is that post-Brexit, we do know the amount of EUSS families. In fact, we do know the amount of EUSS children that exist here. Now, they're obviously going to, on the back of, and I know someone's going to press the red button in a minute, on the back of Brexit, there's been a huge debate about immigration and the issues that relate to discrimination And that debate continues, doesn't it? It's a permanent issue in the media that we can't. And what I'm trying to do is evolve this conversation into closer scrutiny that's helpful for everybody here to help you better understand and for us to better understand, the public to better understand what's effectively going on here. Now, you're right, we're not going to know every incident. It could be related to a slightly nuanced situation or associated with a assault or theft or whatever it is, but it's important that we kind of get a more specific context of where these incidents are happening and why they seem to be so disproportionately low. When the average, we're below average compared to, say, South Gloss. That's important. We sit along Gloss, and wider Gwent regions as local authorities as well. Could we just explore that a little bit? So there's a lot there. I do apologize.
It is, yeah. I mean, first of all, you mentioned about the ageing population. Well, age isn't one of the characteristics for hate crime, so that wouldn't come into, unless I'm mistaken. The five characteristics. Hey?
Asian population.
No, ageism. Age. You said about the elderly. Sorry.
Did I don't remember. Maybe it's my voice. I do,
No, it's Asian.
Oh, right. Well, that would come under the racial, which has been 64 last year to 46 this year. So as I say, that is so far indicating. But don't forget as well, these are only reported. So if people don't report it, then it's not. It's not there. So that one thing that we always stress about, if people are suffering, they make sure they report it, and then it will be part of the statistic. Obviously, we don't know what we don't know. So,
sure.
So that was anything you want to?
So just to be clear about it, I guess where I was going with it was specifically schools and environments where it's likely to be with this potential conflict. And we know that there is a greater concentration throughout the day. So obviously the school would have a corporate responsibility to manage that, and there would be an element of restorative justice in that process before it gets to potentially a hate crime. There could be a history of it. It may not be crimed. The school probably won't phone you up and say, look, I think we're dealing with a hate crime here. But when it gets to that point, what I'm worried about is then, because of that element of restorative justice, and then obviously it's poor optics really, if you particularly, forgive me for saying this, but if you're up for inspection, the last thing you want is to bring broad in in some kind of close scrutiny from the police. Does that make sense? Also, the NHS, the hospital, you only have to go to A&E and you find that it's a very diverse place. We hear time after time the level of abuse that NH staff get, and yet that never manifests. It's considering the depth of the population, the sophistication, that never really manifests into any of the stats about racial abuse.
Can I come in there? Before you come in, Councillor Bond, Officer Sharon Lloyd would like to speak to us, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was just on that point regarding schools, and hopefully just to give the committee some assurance here that aside from the community safety data that we look at in this space, we are also working with our school colleagues and partners through the cohesion agenda around the bullying and tackling bullying in schools. So we're in the process at the moment of developing that policy that's looking at how they're recording any bullying incidents, and as part of those bullying incidents, hate is also one of those categories that we're looking to try and capture and to really kind of drill down into, to understand what those issues might be presenting in our schools and how we can tackle that and support the school to tackle that in the first instance. We're not quite there yet, but we have a draft policy that will be coming through, I believe, the processes with my education colleagues, and that is essentially around how we're starting to build a picture of what is happening in the school environment, recognising that some of the things in the community may not be reported, and some of these things within the schools need to be accurately reported or recorded to ensure that we are detecting this at the earliest point and able to step in to support that school to deal with it. It's not a catch-all, but it's hopefully just to give you a little bit of confidence that we're looking at that.
Thank you, Sharon. Sorry, Chair, through you, if I may. Look, I don't want to develop this, so it's the three of us just having a chat about this issue, which we probably would do in the corridor. But I guess my broader issue is do you genuinely, knowing what you know, taking into account what I said, as officers of this authority, do you think there's significant underreporting here? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I think that's really difficult to say. It's a $64,000 question, isn't it? You know, because you can have the same argument about all crime. What I will mention is one theme that I'm picking up on when I speak to members of the public across Monmouthshire is, and I know I've had conversations with Andy, so I think he would agree with this, is when we speak to members of the community and they bring problems to us, you say, right, are you speaking to the police about this? What's the point? You know, an austerity has badly affected the numbers of the police, the presence of the police and their footprint. So one of the themes that I've been saying for a while is, you know, are the public engaging with the police in the way that they should to report everything? As far as what I'm picking up on the ground is no. So which would go to your point of, is it underreported? But then I can't comment on whether that's the same across other local authorities. And that is one of my concerns, if I'm being perfectly honest, is our lack of engagement or potentially losing the public, as it were, inverted commas.
Thank you.
Just to come back on that, I would, you know, probably say that yes, it is underreported. You know, these are only the figures that somebody's had the courage to pick the phone up and report to the police. There'll be a lot of cases where they choose not to report it for whatever reason, or they just absorb it to keep quiet. So chances are it's well underreported, but we can only report on the actual, as I say, the ones that the numbers that we've been given. But yeah, you're probably right.
Chair, thank you. Thank you for your honesty.
Sharon, thank you. I'd just like to make a point there before we go to poor Councillor Bond, who's been waiting for ages, just to say that it's, I think that's a really welcome policy for schools, because you're kind of nipping it in the bud and dealing with it at the beginning. So the sooner that that's identified at that level, the better. Councillor Bond, thank you for your patience.
Yeah, really, I just wanted to come in before because I want to build on what's been said. So I think it's very underreported. I wonder what the police, their view is of what underreportedness there is in all crimes. I would say that I've just agreed with the police that people will report crimes through myself, and I'll report them. They're happy with that because people are frightened of retribution and not sure that they'd be anonymously reported. So some people are frightened of that. So really around the context, I think Councillor Watts has already said about that, where and when and whatever. But also, if you look at other areas, and this is where I find it difficult, so if you look at Newport, they've got a more diverse population. So really it would be really useful to have this conversation or this information related to how many of the population, what percentage of the population are, for example, of an ethnic group or identify as trans, because our three reported issues might be the only it's not, I'm sure, but it could be the only 3 in Monmouthshire. And if that's the case, it's 100% of people being, having hate crimes against them. So really, can we have a context insofar as the percentage of the population, and what you've mentioned before about how the populations of the different areas would be very useful too. And then the other thing is, you've said about going into schools, but what else are we doing about it, please? Are we thinking of any public, or the police? Are you working with the police to make us all aware of what the situation is and what we should be doing about it? Not just schools, but schools is very welcome. Thank you.
Sharon, do you want to come back?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor. And I think the challenge around some of the percentage of our population is something that we will look at to see what data we can readily access. Obviously, some of the categories within that would fall as hate crime, we wouldn't have the data to understand where those populations, such as trans or religious populations, may be, unless they've been reported to us in that instance within our population. Sorry,
did we have this in the survey last year? Didn't we have this in the? Then we have this from the population survey when people if they've identified as. obviously.
Yeah, obviously where they've identified, we can use that data, but it's the accuracy of that in terms of our wider population. But it's certainly something we will look at across the whole population for you. Yeah, absolutely. In respect of where we're doing the wider engagement around this, we are looking at schools. The policy itself does cover all youth settings as well, so we are looking at how that will bridge out into those community areas where young people up to the age of 25 may frequent. The work that we're doing through the cohesion agenda is also at a very community level, so we are reaching out to those populations that we can identify that want to engage with us around how we can strengthen that community cohesion work within the community. Some of that is also covering intergenerational work between young and old and the perceptions there to break down the barriers between perceived crime and the threat of young people in the community, and also trying to bridge that understanding of different age ranges across the county and how they can impact each other, but how we can develop that broader understanding of different populations. We're also working through developing some of the community offers and groups to try to build those networks, to strengthen those networks. So where people identify as part of discrete populations in our community, we want to bring them together as a kind of collective so that we can start to do that expansive work around that diversity within Monmouthshire and break down those barriers around cultural understanding of different people's religions and faiths and beliefs and their sexual orientation. And we're working quite widely with our youth services around that. We are tapping into our business connections. As we've already mentioned here this morning, we're also looking at our taxis as the first step, but we're doing that with our Gwent colleagues because we recognise that this is a Gwent issue. But this work is still in train, so we are trying to reach out where we can within that community to make sure that we're hitting as many age ranges as possible. But the struggle is always where people want us to come and engage or want to engage with us, and that's something that we would absolutely welcome any support from yourselves or anybody else. So if people are reaching out to you, by all means, please do let us know, and we will happily get in touch with those individuals then to see how we can support them.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Rook? Councillor? All right. Are you okay? Do you want to make a comment?
Yeah. One thing about the repeat offenders, I'd just like to know whether the police are doing more about going back to those victims and maybe plainclothes officers supporting them so that they're not feeling they've got a uniformed officer turning up at their door, that it's discreet and that, you know, there is support given to people and that the police are kind of targeting, you know, where those offences are happening and where, you know, where they can increase their patrols and to make their presence more visible, but also supporting those repeat victims and making sure that they get the backing that they need and the interventions. Thanks.
Good point. Yes. Anybody? Yeah. Yes, John.
Thank you. Just in relation to that, victims of hate crime and repeat victims, there's something called the Victims Code of Practice, which is a matter that the police would deal with, and you get an enhanced service from the police, or you are entitled to an enhanced service. So victims of hate crime, repeat victims, the police should be aware of the Victims Code of Practice. I think it's 2015. So there is legislation in place to say that you get an enhanced service, but obviously that's a matter for the police to deal with when they identify those repeat victims or victims of hate crime. But just to reassure you, that is something that is in place, Councillor. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, to go forward on this, I think, Councillor Watts, would you like to say how you'd like to take this forward, please? Well,
no. I just, sorry, Chair, I wanted to kind of exhaust I did have one other question which came to me, and I do apologise. So I know you're going, oh my God, he's really taking this direction. But when there's, I guess what I wanted to know was, when there's some analysis really done of the figures of hate crime, what I worry about is so the broader picture of radicalisation, so that overlap. So whether it's persistent or whether it's observation, I know you're going to try and we don't want to. We have to be careful here. You don't want to obviously convey any information that could prejudice an investigation or so on and so forth. And the committee are not really interested in that. But where I'm going with is that if there are elements of the population that young people that find themselves where they're involved on online activity that leads them to potential, or the red flags are to do with radicalisation. Is there a kind of an overview that we exist? We know that there's a hate crime unit that exists, and I know that historically there has been observations made within Gwent Force, who historically I believe have been very good at making observations about that. What kind of preventative measures are there, or what red flags are there to so for example, a young man or young girl start to get involved in online activity, how do we monitor that, and how do we de-radicalise that? Does it happen at schools? Does it happen in the community? Is there a special unit? Sorry if I'm out of sync on this. That's my last question. I do apologise for taking it a different direction.
Yeah, no, there is a separate sort of programme that looks at anyone who's been referred into, with those concerns. It's called a channel panel. So that sits monthly or bi-monthly maybe at the minute. But there is a police officer designated to that programme, and he will work individually with some of these children or adults even. But anyone who's been identified as having radical or those sort of tendencies to be radicalised. And we've had I can't give you numbers specifically, but we sit on the channel panel, so we have an input, and just on past experience, it's ranged from 14, 15-year-olds who've displayed certain things in school or at home, whatever, but they've been sort of put into that programme, and it's quite an intense programme because the officer whose responsibility it is will call in other people and experts, like from St Giles Trust, which work very closely with us on the high-end sort of violent, the gangs and the county line stuff. So anyone that fits into that does have an intense programme, obviously to try and get them back on the straight and narrow.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, that's useful to know that there is support. We only know about the front line. Well, I certainly do. Only know about the front line that we see here, but behind you there's a lot more, and really I'd like to know more about it. How do you want to take this forward, Councillor Watts? For forward planning?
Well, no, I think...
We can hear you.
Sorry, I do apologise. So we've had a series of, I think, really good questions, not just my own, but other questions really that have come forward. And we've had some really interesting responses. And I think really, if we could, through you, Chair, pose those similar kind of questions really to the force themselves, to kind of, if we've already covered a piece of legislation. If we're really intent on following through on that legislation, we should be intent on then trying to get some proper answers here. And to be fair to the officers here today, they've done their absolute best to answer, and I'm really satisfied with the responses I've got. But at the end of the day, those questions need to be forwarded to the police themselves. So maybe at some point, maybe not the next meeting, but maybe bringing back in the police and ask them those kind of questions when they've got, as you say, the end of year is due March. So maybe after March, when we've got those stats in front of us, we can come back to this. What do you think, Hazel?
I think that would be helpful, and we're also planning to do a piece of work on county lines, and that would be at your April meeting, so possibly it would be worth us inviting the Chief Superintendent along for both items.
Chair, sorry, through you, Chair. I mean, yeah, I would absolutely welcome that. You mentioned the St Giles Trust, really, so we could probably ask them to come along as well and discuss what work that they're doing. And there's a slight overlap there as well, if members would be happy with that.
Okay. Yes, Sharon, would you like to come in?
Sorry, thank you. It was just to suggest whether or not the members would actually like some information on Prevent and Channel, if that would be helpful for us to circulate that to you, just so you get a better understanding.
I'm pressing my green button to give you the thumbs up.
Yes, thank you very much. That's really good. Yes, Councillor Bond.
Just say that the next meeting in April, we've also got the violence against women and girls, haven't we? So that would be very useful to have the police there for that. Thank you.
Yes. Hazel would like to come in on that, please.
It sort of takes us on to the next agenda item, if you've kind of concluded on that one, Chair.
I was just going to, well, shall I just...
Yeah, if you sum up, and we'll bring that up at the work programme item.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you both for coming today and, enlightening us on what is quite a difficult subject, As you say, is everybody reporting? You haven't got all the details, have you, behind every fact? So it is a hard thing to assess. But, thank you for the work, and we welcome the report as a start anyway, and then we will take it forward and get, the police to come in, and Sharon will add to that report. Mm-hmm. So we will work on it. So thank you very much for allowing us to do that. So, yes, I'll bring back Hazel now to finish off what she was going to say. So you're free to go if you want. Okay.
Well, we're almost at the end of the meeting, so you might as well stay. So the next meeting is on the 24th of April, and we had asked the regional coordinators to bring to us the violence against women and domestic abuse, sexual violence strategy. It's a regional strategy, and we have asked to conduct pre-decision scrutiny on it, but they have advised us that timelines mean that it won't be ready now by the 24th of April to consult with you. We've given them our next meeting date, which is the 19th of June, and they have provisionally confirmed they can attend that meeting. So these changes have taken place since the agenda was dispatched, so I apologise that the work programme that you have in front of you is perhaps slightly out of sync with what I'm saying. But if we had scheduled for County Lines to come to the 24th of April, and I think if we've got attendance from the police, which we have confirmed, I think it would be helpful if we bring the hate crime back and we can ask the police the same questions that you've asked today. We'll also take forward some of the actions that you have asked for today with colleagues here. And the other thing I would suggest is that you invite the members of the People Scrutiny Committee to that meeting, because I know that they're also very interested in county lines and particularly child exploitation. So, I think it would be of interest to them to perhaps attend this meeting and participate. As you know, we don't vote at these meetings, so I don't think there's any need for it to be a joint scrutiny committee, but we can just extend an invite to those members.
Yeah, that sounds an excellent idea, especially, to avoid duplication. So I think that's an excellent idea, and I'm sure they will attend. And they'll be well received. Has anybody else got anything to say about any of that then? Okay, so Hazel, what about, and Armand, what about the forward work programme? Do you want to say anything else apart from what you've just said about the 24th? Okay, that's fine, thank you. Cabinet and Council work planner?
Yeah, that's provided to members for information. You receive an email every week as well with the updated online planner. So if you see anything in there that you think is relevant, but to be fair, it is more perhaps for the other scrutiny committees that are more sort of internally focused. But myself and officers are sort of suggesting topics to you where we think you can make a difference and things that we feel need some public accountability. But you've also got the topics that you raised at the beginning to continue with. So I think we're doing quite well getting through our list of those, and also, bringing back things where you still want more follow-up. So I think it's quite an interesting agenda, and I hope that members are finding it interesting as well. Just so that you know, back in May, the council will elect the committees all over again. That's something that we do each May. So, I hope that you all have found this year interesting and that you want to remain on this committee. And your next meeting, the chair will note the date and time now, but it's as we discussed.
Chair, Chair, if I may. I mean, Hayes was just stolen my thunder there. That was my little lead up to say thank you for your attendance for the last year. For the record, so I'm not going to duplicate that. For the record, can I express my thanks to Penny for chairing this meeting today. She's done an excellent job. So with that, I'll pass that back to the Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I certainly hope you're better by the next meeting. I'm sure you. Yeah, well, that really finishes it off, apart from the minutes of the meeting, so of the previous meeting, which was held on the 28th of November. Have you all read the meeting? Can we take the meeting, the minutes as read? Any comments to make? Any forward? Okay, we'll take those as read. Thank you very much. And thank you for attending. Thank you to the officers. It's all been very helpful and interesting. And thank you all for coming today. So we look forward to seeing you next meeting, 24th of April. We've been through it. It will be a very interesting one, and we will definitely invite the People's Scrutiny Committee regarding the county lines and hate crime agenda item. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.